Welcome to this special episode of Monstrous Flesh, a podcast that explores the role of women in horror. I'm Meg, one of your podcast hosts.
Hello, I'm Clelia, the other host of the podcast.
And on this episode, we're joined by the incredible writer and director Carlota Pereda, and we are so excited, it goes without saying. Carlota began her career writing for television before completing her first short film, Las Rubias. Her short film, Cerdita, won the Forqué Award and the Goya Award for Best Short Film. Carlota adapted Cerdita into her first film, Piggy, which was released in 2022. And Carlota's latest film, La Amita, was released in 2023 and has already been nominated at the 38th Goya Awards, which is very exciting. So thank you so much for joining us today, Carlota.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for taking the time. It's so exciting. So I met Carlota at Celluloid Screams last year when we did a masterclass, and it was just so exciting to talk to you and to meet you and, you know, hear about your process. And Carlota very generously agreed to come on the podcast, so we're so excited.
I'm so grateful for it. Thank you.
And as I said when we met last time, Carlota, Piggy was my standout film from the festival circuit in 2022. So getting to speak to you were like, oh, I was so excited. So it's really brilliant to have you on the podcast. And we thought before we got into the film that you'd chosen that we'd just have a bit of a chat generally about your career to date. So do you want to kick us off, Clelia?
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. It's absolutely brilliant, as Meg already said. I mean, and Piggy is a film that Meg and I have been talking about a lot. So really excited that you can join us today. But just wondering if for listeners, really, if you can, tell us a little bit about your career, how you got started in filmmaking, your journey leading to writing and directing Cerdita would be amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me. I guess my story is the same as everybody. I just love film. I love film. I love reading, and I love writing as well. So I didn't know what I wanted to do at first. I didn't know if I wanted to be a screenwriter or if I wanted to be a filmmaker. To be fair, in Spain, there were not many women directors at all. There were more writers, fiction writers, novelists and stuff. So I didn't know which path to take. And I always loved genre. In Spain, we used to have something here when we were growing up that it was, they put these programs in the morning. Like they thought that anything that has to do with horror or fantasy was for kids. So you wake up in the morning on Saturday and your parents would just leave you next to the television, And there was only 2 networks, so you could not choose. There was either 1 or 2. And in the other one, they had the morning mask, so you wouldn't want to. So you basically spend hours watching horror movies.
Sounds amazing.
Sounds amazing, yeah. Sounds ideal.
Yeah, exactly. So we come from a generation like Paco Plaza. We're almost more or less the same age. I think I'm a bit younger than Paco Plaza and Balagueró. But we used to watch that. That was normal television, normal kids television for us. And then also we have Narcisso Ibanez Serrador, which is the director of Who Can Kill a Child. He also had a program in television that were horror stories. First were adaptations of Edgar Allan Poe, and then his original material. So basically that's something that was very much in what we used to watch here in Spain. And I also always loved reading. I used to be afraid of the dark. But after I read Dracula, I was no longer afraid of the dark. So I always loved horror. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to become I come from a very conventional family. They always wanted me to be a lawyer, of course. Yes. So I didn't know how to become a directors, but they opened a film school in Spain, in Madrid, and they only let 8 people in each year.
Okay.
So I applied and I got in, and after that, I started working in television because I got a gig while I was in film school. I got a gig in the most important television show in Spain. Going to the film school was expensive, and you got paid for working in television. So it was really a no-brainer. I didn't have the money to do the film school. I was working in a karaoke at nights just to pay for the film school. And I could work in something that I loved in television. So I started working in TV until I realized that I was doing something that I love, but I was not doing why I started doing film. So I started really wanting to be a filmmaker, and I needed to find my own voice. So that's why I did my first short, The Blondes, which is based on a true story about a gang of blondes who kidnap other blondes, because they realize all post blondes look the same. Which is exactly what you shouldn't do in a first short, because they say, no, the first short should be something like 2 people in a room, talking about something. And then it was 18 locations in 18 different places of the world. Yeah, and a car chase. So, and after that, I realized there were some people that had the same. They like the short a lot. Travel a lot in the United States and also in France and also in the UK. And I realized that there's some people that had the same sense of humor that I had, and there may be an audience for me. So I started working on a project for a film, based on the Blondes. But I got the idea for Piggy, the short. And I had to do that first. Because, you sometimes you fall in love with stories, and that happened with me. So I did Piggy first, and Piggy did really well. And I also had to tell her story. I realized there were so many more about Sarah that was just that what was in the short. So I started developing the feature. It was not my original idea to make a feature of Piggy, but it kind of went after that. After I started shooting the short film, that I realized that I liked this character so much, and I wanted to know more about her. But my first idea was not to make a feature of her.
Wow, that's amazing. I was going to ask about this actually, if you had already planned the feature when you wrote the short film. That's incredible that you got yourself immersed in that character story and decided to develop it.
Yeah, actually, with the Blondes, I did have the idea to make a feature, but it was too expensive, so I said I had to make a short film. And yeah, so I met my producer for Marina Films, and she told me that, well, I thought she was good. She just, because she was a friend of a friend and she had seen my short films. Piggy had not won the Goya Award yet. It hadn't been released just in a few festivals. But she met a friend of mine, and my friend showed her my shorts. She met me for a drink, and I thought she was meeting me for a drink because she was in Madrid and she didn't have anyone to hang out. So we met for a drink, and she said, well, no, I'm not here for a drink. I'm here because I want to do whatever you want to do in film. And I said, wow, okay, fantastic. So I had this, and I told her that I had the idea to make Piggy into a feature, and she said, yes, let's do that.
I think what's so inspiring about your sort of journey is obviously all your hard work that you've really worked. You've not come from that sort of background. You've sort of carved your own path. But the way, I think what's so interesting is the way that you can see how much things have just sort of aligned. And so much about filmmaking is like fate, isn't it? It's meeting right people at right time. It's submitting to right festivals. And obviously, I mean, Piggy's fantastic. And I'm sure it would have done well whenever you released it and whatever festival it went to. But it's just interesting to hear about how all these things have sort of aligned to make a success. I mean, talking about Piggy, because obviously me and Clelia are like super fans. I were really interested, and I know we talked a little bit about this at the masterclass, about the role of sort of social class and class tensions in your work. And I think that particularly comes through in Piggy. You know, she's very much outcast because of prejudice around sort of the body and its limits and things, but also because she works in a butcher shop, a family at butchers, and it's very seen as everybody sort of looks down on her because of that. And I wondered, is that a theme that is sort of runs throughout your work, or was that just something that felt right for Piggy?
Well, I think it's something that it runs everything. In everything I do, it's also one of the main themes in the Blondes and in everything I've done, really.
Mm.
I think it's very, when you see movies that the scene that there's most of movies are either about the working class from the perspective of the higher classes, or about money. And you see these movies, and you see maybe these writers, and they see they live in these amazing houses, and say, I mean, this guy works for a small magazine, and you see he's working just one day a week. How can he afford this massive apartment? For me, it takes me out of the movie if you don't see the socioeconomical context, because I think that's what makes us who we are as well. I mean, you cannot take your where you come from who you are. It's not in every aspect of your life, but it's basically in the socioeconomic aspect. I think is one of the things that really is the most important thing of what makes us who we are.
Yeah, I agree, because as everybody knows who's ever listened to more than one episode of this podcast, I will jam social class in somewhere.
Always get on your soapbox,
on my
which
soapbox.
we love, and which is amazing. I love this, where you mentioned about, the point of view of, when working class is addressed, or lower classes are addressed in film. That it's always, it's very often from a point of view of, either from classes above or judging, or that, that idea of exploitation, really. And I read in an interview that Texas Chainsaw Massacre, for example, was an influence on the film, which when I heard, I was like, oh, yes, it's kind of like, the heat kind of like, hits you in the face in the same way in both those films. But in terms of this, this exploration of class and characters, it's amazing that you've managed to take this as an influence, but really turn it in a way that that is very ground level. It's from the perspective of that character, and we never leave that point of view, which I find so fascinating. So yeah, I was just wondering, in terms of in terms of influences, really, what what else did you bring to that film, or what did you look at and thought, I'm gonna I love bits of this and bits of that, but I'm gonna make it my own.
Yeah, I think, Toby Hooper is Toby Hooper, sorry, I say it the Spanish way. Yeah, he's a massive influence. I think the way he combines tones as well, there's drama, there's comedy, but also the way he addresses class. You can tell that he's not from a wealthy, he knows textile, he knows the people he's talking about. And the way he talks about that without making it the major theme, but actually you can see that this killer comes because all that things happen socioeconomically. That the socioeconomical background is the thing that make this character, this family of assassins. Without that, they wouldn't be murders. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I absolutely love that. And he's an influence, but also I would say I never talked about this, but I think an influence is social. I used to read a lot American writers, especially women writers. Mm. When they tell me that, do I have female influences? I would say that most of my influences were not because they were not that many. I mean, I didn't know that the Pet Sematary was directed by a woman until later on. I went to film school and I didn't know who Claire Denis was until later on. And I didn't know Agnes Varda. I didn't know them. They didn't introduce us to them. And you have to be introduced to those people because they're not mainstream. And but I didn't know Carson McCullers. And I didn't know Flannery O'Connor. And also I also knew Shirley Jackson. And those women were really huge influences on those characters and the way to address the loneliness of the women and talking about women that we really know and how that loneliness can really eat you alive, and can really pry on your bad instincts in a sense, but that makes you human, And yeah, I think those women really were a huge influence on constructing the character of Sarah. And also cinematically, I'd say that as well. I didn't like a lot Eden Lake. You know, there was I like that movie and the way you say, and also Deliverance, the first part of Deliverance, this sense of this class struggle and how but in the movie is like you can see it from the perspective of the upper high class, that they're scared of the you know, of the rednecks. But I wanted a bit of that as well, because the audience is gonna be that people. You know, they're gonna judge Sarah in the beginning, so they're gonna be that people. They're gonna judge her. And also I'd say Oncle du Lac, which is a movie that's called Stranger by the Lake, which is a French movie about it's a cruising ground for gay men. And there starts to be murders, and there's this killer, this guy who could be the killer, but he's so sexy, and you don't mind him killing you just to get. Yeah. So there was a huge influence for the short, actually, for the sound design in the short. And also Who Can Kill a Child is the first movie. You know, in Spain there were not that many movies in the horror movies, because we came from a dictatorship. So the first horror movies were from the 60s, and most of them, when Franco was getting sick, and when he died, more movies appear, of course. But still, it was a very Catholic, restrictive society. And the first thing that came was exploitative sex, because now there were you could show sex on screen. You could show women's breasts. So basically, most horror movies were sometimes an excuse to show women's body part. And this movie is really focuses on creating an atmosphere, on creating the sense of dread. And also the other movies, the other horror movies, most of them were set to be outside of Spain. You know, like maybe as a way also because to make the audience, these things happen, but it's okay. Here we are still Catholic, so you get all horror movies, but they're filmed in Galicia or in Madrid, but they're set in the UK. You know, and they have these people with some of these names. But here, it was the first time that it's set in Spain, and you could see things you could clearly recognize. And I don't know if for people from the UK that you are accustomed to see horror stories set in your country, you don't realize how groundbreaking it is to see a horror movie that is set in things and you recognize, and suddenly these things could happen to you, in plain daylight. And I absolutely adore that movie.
Yeah, I mean that's so interesting, and to hear about that context, and I think what I really appreciate about Piggy is Sarah, and that I love Shirley Jackson as well, and that loneliness and what it drives you to, and that the depth of that character, because we've talked about it. We did a summer slasher miniseries, and we watched a lot of 80s slashers, and we're very much like, these women are very underdeveloped as characters. So much like like you said, when you first started to get horror movies in Spain, a lot of it were a vehicle for showing naked women, which is sort of the slasher cycle in the 80s. And I think what you've done in Piggy is to totally turn that on its head and be like, look at this woman. Oh, she's not here just to get her clothes ripped off and be stabbed to death. She's a complex, relatable person, and her pain is so visceral and relatable. I think for most women have gone through, particularly when you're younger, that feeling of alienation, and she's in this small town and nobody gets her. And then the person who does get her is perhaps not the person you would want. But then the complexity of that dynamic between Sarah and this murderer is, spoilers, by the way, said. But the complexity of that relationship, I think, is so interesting. And I wonder, has anyone ever had a negative reaction to that? Has anyone ever said anything about you know, because I can imagine for some people it might have made them feel a bit uncomfortable. Like, oh, am I supposed to root for them? I know I was sort of rooting for them. I was like, oh, maybe they'll end up together. And I had to keep going, no.
Well, the funny thing is that the people, most people want them to be together. But some people get uncomfortable by the fact. One of the things that happened to me when I travel with a movie is that it's not that often, but I would say it's happened a couple of times when I was in you know, when sometimes you see these really small towns when most of the audience is men, older men, because it's the guys who go to the cinema or to go to the cine clubs. And I realized that they get really, really, really pissed off by the masturbation scene. Well, they told me vocally, this movie is, oh my God, yeah, this is so outrageous. Because, you know, it's fine. I try to play that with the film as well. It's fine when Sarah is a victim. You know, when she's a victim, they come and relate to her, oh, poor her, you know. But when she's a complex woman who is not only desired, because I think they can see themselves desiring her, but they cannot think that she's the one who desires. And that really pisses them off. I mean, and that's happened where they get really outrageous, and the conversation in the Q&A goes about that. And I thought, you know, things have not changed that much.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it says a lot how like people want to, you know, put a character in a, you know, they either understand it because they can put it in a category or in a box, but as soon as you said, if she's the one who decides, or, you know, her own fate, it's like, oh no, hang on, she's supposed to, you know, go along with it, but actually not be complicit in it, and it's just crazy, really.
Yeah, and that idea about sex, but sex from a woman's perspective, you know, like you say, Sarah's desire, it's not desire being enacted upon her, it's her own agency, and how that is, and that is still so shocking to people. But I'm glad you're freaking out, old men. That's what we should be doing.
Yeah, that's what you want. Like, I was so happy. I mean, I remember the people who drove me to the Q&As because people walked out. Man, like very angry, and then people say, "I'm so sorry." I said, "No,
no, perfect, exactly. This is the desired effect."
You're not my audience,
right?
Exactly, yeah. With them out. I did find really interesting what you mentioned about this idea of the geography of fear, basically, of, you know, of Who Can Kill a Child being, you know, that first film using that you know, the landscape as or, you know, or that setting really as horror, and I guess in the UK is very different. Because, you know, I feel like a lot of films, and actually, as you said, films that are shot abroad, but, you know, still set in the UK, and, you know, to the point where actually it doesn't, you know, it doesn't feel, you know, it still doesn't feel real. It's like there isn't that real sense of threat that you get from, you know, from. So yeah, that's a really interesting concept, and one I hadn't really, you know, thought about before. So yeah, it's amazing to be able to trace that back to pinpoint it.
Yeah, because I mean, it used to happen in literature. We used to have Beckett used to is a Spanish author. Becker used to write the stories about, but they were always set in the 19th century. You know, for people in the 19th century, they were scary, but not for us anymore. You know, but after that, it disappeared. I mean, Spain disappeared from being as a set for horror, and still today. You can see some of the movies that are, not all of them, of course. You have Rec by Paco Plaza or Veronica and so many other movies. But some other movies, when they do horror in Spain, you see it as a Spanish woman, and you see this looks like the US. I mean, these people have nothing to do with the Spanish people. Because you get the thing, everything has to look like it was set in the US. Okay. And for me, that's something that I may enjoy it, but I don't love it as much.
Yeah, don't relate as much.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's something there's something I love as well about the Korean movies, because Korean movies, you can see they're pretty much there. I mean, you see The Wailing, which is an amazing movie. I mean, it's one of my favorite movies of the past decade. Yes, and Memories of Murder as well. But those are movies that are fantastic, and they're so political as well, and so tonally rich and so local as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big folk horror fan, and part of the reason I like folk horror is because it's that specific place and time, and that's where that fear lives, isn't it? And even in more modern folk horrors like Candyman, even though it's modern, it's contemporary, the location is still central to the story. And I'd not even realized until you've sort of talked about it that Spain has not got that history of films and particularly horror set in Spain. So it's really exciting that that's starting, in your work, that's starting to come out. Because, it must feel really strange to be watching these films and thinking, but that's not Spain, that's not what I know. And it does take you out of it a bit because it's not as frightening if it's not in your own backyard, is it? It's like, oh, well, that could be anywhere.
Yeah, it's telling you it's fiction from the get-go.
So, now we've had this fabulous discussion, Carlota, would you like to tell us what film you've picked and give us a synopsis?
The story is, the movie is called Who Can Kill a Child? It's by Narciso Ibanez Serrador, who is known by Chicho here in Spain. He's not from Spain. He's Uruguayo, but he came to live to Spain, and he works mostly here. And the thing is that this movie is about this couple of British tourists who come to Spain to spend some time together, away from the kids. The woman is pregnant, and they still have problems. They didn't know they wanted to have the child or not. And they decide to escape in the sun of Spain, but they find this very faraway island that is just populated with kids, and something odd is going on there. And Who Can Kill a Child is something that happens, and there are a menace.
Yeah, that's a brilliant synopsis. I think that really...
and a menace is the least you can say about those kids, definitely. I'm so glad you picked it. I mean, if there was a good film to watch at the start of the year to snap you out of the Christmas spirit, that's definitely one. And also, as a woman who doesn't have, children and feels quite, ambiguous about it, then that was like, yeah, great.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know you've talked a little bit about this film already and its influence on you, but what made you pick it for today?
Because it's a movie that not many people know outside of the US. I mean, you go to film festivals and some directors may know it, but most people don't know this movie. And I think it's a brilliant movie. I think it's so well directed. It's so well written by himself as well. But he uses another name because you still have the threat of a censorship. So in case, someone else.
Wasn't me.
Yeah, and I love the way it's set. I love that it's set in Spain. I love that it's it also has this thing that he wanted to make appealing to an international audience by having the leading. He has this mind to, I'm going to have this the leading the protagonists are going to be British, so I can sell it abroad. Which is something like very exploitative, but I like that. and also we had this idea that we could not be protagonists of our own stories, so it had to be someone from outside. The Spanish people could not be the leading the leaders of a serious horror. His first movie is also set outside of Spain. His first movie is called The House That Screamed, and it's set outside of Spain. So it says a lot about Spain. It says a lot about horror in Spain. The way it was shot, the way it was, you see that you had to be someone from outside. So because they had to be the protagonist, because the Spanish people could not be the protagonist. Still, we had not we couldn't see ourselves as heroes of the story. And also because it also says a lot about Spain in plain daylight, and the way the way horror is seen like something that so it's horror as a very thematical story. And I think sometimes he maybe is a bit too much, like with the intro, like he has this disclaimer. It's like 8 minutes of this. Come on, dude. But I love it because it's not perfect, but you can see the mind behind the story, trying to make this and also make it palatable to a post-Frankist society. where you're going to see people killing kids.
Yes, preparing the terrain for it.
Yeah. And you're preparing like, okay, maybe this,
Definitely.
So they could kind of say it's like a bit of a disclaimer at the beginning of the movie, in a sense. And I love all those how those things are done with such a good taste. The way you see the first time he kills a kid is fantastically shot. And there's so many things in this movie as well. The way he moves the camera is almost like Alfred Hitchcock. He used to direct the horror stories for TV, and he used to do it in the style of Hitchcock stories. The Alfred Hitchcock Presents. He was very much influenced by that. And I love the way he creates tension just with the camera, just with in plain daylight. I mean, you have to think that this movie is just 1 year after Jaws. Mm-hmm. But it's also done. It's 1 year after Jaws, but in Spain, Jaws was released way later than that. Oh. So it's almost at the same time. I can see the music has been inspired. I'm sure he heard this music because there's some moments like, okay. But I love it. And it's also one of the first times that you can see child's tunes like it's na 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 na. Yeah. After the Rosemary's Baby, and there's not that many times that's been used. But I just love the way it's shot. I mean, just for the idea when what the woman comes up out of the hut and sees the woman who has these kids. The kids are all right, and she just slaps the kids. Come on, get out of here! And she comes out, and you can see, and the camera. The dolly comes down, and you can see that the kids from the village are coming behind her.
Such a fantastic shot.
And the way you see at the end, this is a spoilers, of course. At the end, and she's been killed by the kid inside. Oh, and the husband should really just take the kid out of her, and he doesn't do that. He tries to stop her.
I mean, I had the bits that you've picked out were exactly the bits that I'd picked out as well. I thought that shot when you see the cliff and all kids are just coming down, and I think it's such an interesting idea, this idea that, children will become murderous, and what would we do? And that thread running through about violence, about, the montage at the start is it goes on for quite a long time. But, really does emphasize that point about who can kill a child. Well, everybody can, because this is what happens when there's, unrest and the people who suffer are children. But that seems like such a faraway concept until, so I thought that setup were really interesting, although I did have to keep sort of looking away a bit. I was like, oh. Right.
Yeah. That they, in the United States, they cut the first 8 minutes. In the American release, the first 8 minutes they are out of the movie, of course, because most of it is images from the Vietnam War.
Yeah. But that's so interesting, isn't it? I mean, so much of what you've talked about already has been about, the way that horror is made and received in the place that it's created, but also abroad. And I think so much of that, because that is a very clear criticism, particularly of America, in terms of how children suffer under, when war takes place. And to cut that, to sanitize it. I mean, you see that so much that films, they do get sanitized, don't they? Particularly horror. And there's a real cowardice in that, I always think, that you can't face, this is the truth. So he's making this film that's a horror film, and you're like, oh, well, kids would never do that. But, you can't take the reality, which is, it's really interesting. Yeah, sorry, I'm not getting on my soapbox again. Political soapbox.
Please do. No, it's quite that's the one. But yeah, I mean, just to echo what you both said, really, about the this opening sequence, which is keeps making you look away, but at the same time you're about to watch a film titled "Who Can Kill a Child," and the violence that this implies. And I did find it fascinating that most of it takes place in daylight. There's but most of the violence is also implied. There isn't actually a lot of gore in the film. And it is that opening sequence that really makes you shy away, because it is, reality. And, although we're more than happy to, put ourselves in front of those, those fictional scenarios. It's he makes such a poignant statement, right from the get-go. And I think some people could be like, oh, is it not apologist, but it's kind of like it's like to put that at the start to be kind of like, well, so that we set the scene for for what is happening next. But it's also reflection on what do we do to the to those generations, and how do we expect violence to not become a commodity that's gonna transfer between to this generation, like something that is so casual, basically.
I absolutely love as well the beginning. You see the village party, and the kids are playing the piñata with the violence in the piñata. And then you go to the village.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh my God, that's just happened like this.
That's beautiful, yeah.
That were absolutely one of my notes. I love the piñata scene because it was such a good way to contrast that violence with that earlier, when you saw them all swarm in over all sweets, and I thought, oh, that feels like an omen. That feels, and then later
and
on,
with the same giggles and the same joy, in both scenes. It's kind of like that utter childish joy that's replicated a bit. Is just so disturbing.
Yeah.
And using a scythe instead of a stick.
It was brilliant.
But even,
it was brilliant.
I mean, it is quite. I would say if people haven't seen it, although obviously watch it before you listen to this because we've ruined the film.
But have to put a spoiler alert at the start, yes.
But it is quite slow burn at first in terms of we see them and it's so crowded. Oh, we don't want to be here. We want space, and we're going to go to this remote place and everything. And then they get there, and it's all. I mean, these people are the classic Brits abroad because they've got no social awareness at all. No idea. Like, everywhere's empty, everywhere's deserted. Oh, they're all probably just having they're having a fiesta on the other side of Ireland. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that's fine. But the way that sort of that menace and that dread builds, and then the first violence really is a little girl attacking an old man with his own walking stick, which when it comes, it's because it's
shocking.
It's shocking because it's been building so gradually. This idea that there's something's not right. And then when you see that, but that's quite cathartic in a way because you're waiting, aren't you? You're like, come on, what's happening?
Something is happening.
And
it does deliver.
It does deliver. And the real shock actually of that scene is when he confronts her and she's just giggling at him, like it's just I find that the real disturbing part of it, because you don't actually obviously it's implied again that she's beating that old man with his walking stick, but it's just her response is just so out of this world, so what? It's just a game.
Yeah.
And also the title is so great because it's like because it says who can kill a child, so you're gonna have to kill them. So the first time you see a child, they're a threat.
It does set that up really well, and I think I find children creepy at best of times. So I have to say, my alarm bells would have started ringing as soon as there were just all them kids hanging around. When I pulled up in boat, I'd have turned around, I'd have been gone. So I would have survived this film.
It's so interesting that so many people, as you rightly said, that outside of Spain is not it's a film that I'd heard of the director and I'd seen his other feature, The House That Screamed, but never came across this one, which is, I'm so glad I've seen it. And, when you think, it's a film like Children of the Corn is so popular, which is so pale in comparison, to this, it just makes you feel like, this deserves to be.
This one is 16 years earlier than this one. This movie this movie just because it was made in Spain, and that's why it didn't travel that much internationally, because they felt for some people it was too shocking still. That you see kids being killed. You see just by the scene of this coming from a Catholic dictatorship in Spain. There's this moment when he enters the church and you see the kids taking communion, and you see that they have killed a woman, and the woman is on the floor and she's naked in a church. So that was a bit too much for many people at that time.
Because I do think it's such a it's so perverse, isn't it? Like the film is very perverse because, you know, you've got these children, like you said clearly, they're doing these really violent, brutal things, but they're still laughing like they're just playing a game. It's just like they're really unaffected by it. And then, to see that scene in church and even that, like they're pulling this woman's clothes off and they're giggling like it's a game, and it's so perverse. And you're just like, oh, you little perverts, what you doing? You know, but that it's the way, I think what's so interesting about it is the way that it takes that childlike innocence, and they're still innocent, but the murderers, to them, they're not. It's all just like this game, and it's so interesting to see that. And that scene in the church, I did think, wow, that's really for the time it were made and where it were made, really sort of taboo.
That would have been really shocking.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, and also the ending is so perverse as well.
God,
like,
definitely.
It's them.
I know.
I were really, because me and Clelia I watched it last night, and Clelia had watched it a bit before me, and so I were texting Clelia like, "What is happening?" And then when they were all like chasing him, and Clelia said, "Who can kill a child?" Me, and I were like, "Me, give me a flamethrower. I'll kill all these kids. I don't care." But there is that real moral conundrum for him, because it's like the children, and think, well, yeah, but kill or be killed at this point, because
no, absolutely. There's that great scene when the child is like pointing a gun at her, and he catches it at the last moment, and he ends up shooting the kid, and she's so shell shocked by it, obviously as you would be, but again that title works so well because it is it is a slow burner, as you said, the film, but it's also the violence from the part of the adults only happens at the point where they just really don't have any choice anymore, so really. So
the thing is, when I saw this movie when I was very young. And so there's a difference when I've seen it afterwards, because there was no way you could see it because there were no DVDs or anything. So I saw it. I don't remember what I saw, but I think I saw it with my cousins in a VHS, and I was the kid, you had to root for them. Come on, they're destroying the world. These fucking adults,
Yeah.
And now I see it. And I see from that perspective, in a sense, like, okay, maybe we should just die, leave the kids, or fucking assholes, kill them, these tiny bastards. It depends. And so you see from the perspective, and one of the times when I saw it again, I'd seen it before, I think in a DVD or something as well, but I saw it on the big screen. In a festival here in Spain, because they were playing the tribute to Narcisso Ibanez Serrador, and it was amazing. I saw it with my wife, and she was watching the movie. She's from the UK, and she said, "This is a masterpiece. Why haven't I seen it before?" Yeah, it's so good. I mean, watching in the big screen is just an amazing experience. We had to convince the people for Solid Speech to do that.
Yeah, because it is. I mean, it's so. I mean, just to see that island is so beautiful, and it looks so idyllic, and there's the sea and all beautiful built. It's this really lovely looking place with so much horror, and I think on a big screen that would look fantastic.
Especially the scenes, because there's obviously, it feels the film pays homage to Alfred Hitchcock's The Bird. There's that scene when they walk, towards the boat, and the children are just sitting there, sitting pretty like birds, and it's just, to see it on the big screen would be, really, you couldn't, you had to hold your breath. I just think it's incredible. Sense of tension is amazing. Yeah,
I mean, what I think's really interesting about it is the dynamic between the couple. I never remember anyone's names, Carlota. This is my fatal flaw. Apart from Sarah's.
Tom and Evelyn.
Tom and Evelyn. But it's, I think the fact that before they go to Ireland, they're sitting in that room and all rockets are going off outside, and they're like, oh, we need peace, we need somewhere quiet. But they're talking about this baby. And Evelyn says to Tom, well, you wanted to kill him. And I thought, what a strange way to talk to your husband about, and he's very much justifying it, like, we've got two already, but there's obviously been that conflict about, are we going to have another baby? And so then when you see when he does shoot this, 4-year-old who is holding a gun quite adeptly, I would say. I mean, that kid was a threat.
Menace.
But, there's the horror. She's so traumatized, but you can feel, or at least I did anyway, underneath. She's like looking at him like, I always knew you were capable, of doing this.
It is a lot that is the man who's taking the gun and killing him, like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about that scene in the when they're talking about the kid is like, because I watched this movie before I did Piggy, and and she goes to bed, and there's the firecrackers in the background, and it sounds like it's the war going on outside.
Yeah.
So there's so many different layers that it's a very good movie for stoners, I think, because they'll feel the different details as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And interesting that it is the man who is, and then after that, I mean, he does go to town, really. I mean, he's not shy then. At that point.
He's not shy.
Pass me that rifle and we'll be fine.
Yeah, and also, you see, some of the things that happen is because of he makes mistakes. He should have said the first moment, okay, I think something's gone wrong. It's going to happen in this island. And if he had confided in his wife, they would have get out of there.
Yeah.
But he keeps quiet.
Yeah, because that's something that you see in so many horror films is women go, hold on. No, but they're not believed. And so much of that film is him just saying to her, everything's fine. Even when she's like, what did that girl do to that old man? And he's like, nothing, they were playing. She's like, she hit him with a stick. What do you mean? But he treats her like a child. Even he treats he very much infantilizes her. And then when they've got to go, she's like, I can't run. I don't know what. And because he's still not said to her, there's a band of children on this island that are going to murder us if we don't leave.
Yeah, and also she's heavily pregnant, I would say so, but she literally can't.
Yeah, she's trying to run and she's like, I can't.
Yeah, it really hurts when she falls on her belly.
God, yeah.
It is shocking. I do think there are moments in it like that when she falls and she just falls straight flat on her stomach and you're like, oh no. You feel it's very, I think very impressive for when it were made and the sort of conditions in which it were made, that it is so unflinching. I think there's scenes in it that even today people would be shocked by, like if it were a film made today. Particularly, I think at the end when he's just sort of volleying kids into sea and just whacking kids with a stick.
Yes. There's always talks about the remake. They made a remake in Brazil that was really bad, and but they're always making a whole of a remake or a Spanish remake now, and they say that I've heard that there's a very important Spanish horror director who has the rights, so that's why. Yeah, they're in talks with him to do it.
Yeah. I would be interested. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, I've seen the remake from 2012, Come Out and Play, which is just. It's like, why did they bother? It's rubbish. But it always feels. I mean, yes, it would be great to get an update, I guess. But I think it's just still so relevant. It's almost like, is there any need really to remake that film? It's like just show the original. I don't think
you can improve it.
No, precisely.
No. I mean, there's some things you could do differently now you see it from today's perspective, but why do it? I mean, it's already
exactly.
done.
Yeah, exactly.
I think as well, it's like a lot of films, if you were going to remake them, and I understand now why directors are setting films in the past, because so much of the modern world makes it impossible to build that horror. And they're on island, there's no phones, there's like one central place where it's not like they've got a mobile phone and they can just ring for help. They're trapped. Whereas if you set it now, they'd have to drop the phone in sea, or it'd be some clunky.
Well, I can tell you that in Madrid, for example, in La Vera, where I shot Piggy, there's no connection. There's no you can not use your phones if you're outside of the town. You just can't, because there's no. Just
yeah.
So I guess in Spain, people will buy you don't have the mobile phones there because it doesn't work.
Yeah, but that's what's so interesting about them settings as well, isn't it? Particularly in Piggy, I thought that isolation. I mean, I grew not quite as rural, but I grew up in quite a rural place, and so idea of that small town isolation, I think it's still very very relevant. But yeah, like you said, there are places still where you would be stuck with the murderous children. Yeah. You would be trapped.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think in terms of, I know you've said this were a big influence, and I can see actually now I've seen it, even down to like the sinister little shadows, and they're passing by windows all the time, and they're always there, aren't they? There's always one lurking just right corner, and it's so menacing because every time you turn around, there's like a child's face. It's really frightening.
I like that it doesn't waste much time as well on giving a really convoluted explanation as to what's affecting the children. Why did they become like this? I mean, there is this moment where that little girl looks in the eyes of the other one, and you kind of like, that's it, she's infected or whatever. But there isn't I really like the fact that it's not like it's not giving you any any real explanation, because it's like the context is it should be enough.
Yeah. That would be the bad thing about if they did a sequel, and not a remake, but a sequel. Probably the sequel who have to explain something, and they will go, "Oh, that's terribly bad," because when you start explaining is when things get.
Exactly. Like, who cares? That's not the point really of the film. It's really interesting actually thinking of the social cultural context, because around the time they came out, I mean, around the world there were the film with that theme of evil children. Think the Omen, The Exorcist. I mean, not necessarily a group of children being affected. Although obviously there's lots of books that explore this, but it's it feels like it was very popular at that time. I mean, like what's happening to the children? Who's thinking of the children? Just before that satanic panic. It's like it's really a really interesting thing to.
Yeah, and also there was this discussion about the abortion at that time, especially here in Spain. And you could say this movie could go both ways. I mean, pro and anti. It depends on who's reading the movie, basically, who's watching the movie, and say, "Come on, take the key."
Take what you want.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I did say after I'd finished watching it that I didn't anticipate yesterday that I would see a woman murdered by her own unborn baby, and I mean, there we go. I honestly think that is one of the best. That makes me sound a bit weird, but one of the best scenes that I've seen in a long time in a horror. It's so just powerful. I thought really powerful and really just unique in its way as well. And the idea of and the fact that he's still not listening to his wife. I thought, you are the worst. You are the worst.
And after that, he doesn't have any problem killing 1,000 kids.
Yeah, he'll blow them all away then. He's not bothered. The shot of it as well, because he sort of shoots just her face and the horror in her eyes when she's like, he's killing me. And you're like, no. Yeah, but that fear, that idea about the sort of that I mean, I think they could have maybe done a bit more. She could have had more of a role in it, because I think she's the one who really suffers. I mean, being murdered by a fetus, that's that's pretty bad. But that she's, that maternal aspect is not really played up as much, and I think that could have been really interesting to see more of her perspective. But that when she realizes that the girl at the start's touched her stomach, and she's obviously done past this into the baby, and then it's like, you can't get it out. And it's so good. I thought it was fantastic. I mean, again, that makes me sound weird, but you know what I mean. I mean, good company.
The context of the film.
It's so well thought of, the whole movie, and also the idea of some things that are comedy, but at the same time are creepy, like all the chickens. Chickens.
Just burnt black.
Something bad has happened if they left them.
That would have been the first clue, right? One of the first clues.
But that's the thing. It's very that's what's so sinister about it, I think, is that it's like people have vanished. It's like Mary Celeste. you know, like teacups are still on table and chickens are still turning, but they're just burnt, so you know that something's happened, but there's no real obvious sign of violence until you see little flashes like the woman in the supermarket.
Oh yeah.
But you never. Where are the bodies? That is what I kept thinking.
Yeah.
Where are the bodies?
Yeah,
of these people?
remember that one of the bodies arrives at the beginning of the movie, and they say, "Oh, someone must have drowned."
Yeah, that woman. Yeah, she floats up, doesn't she?
But you say, "Oh, something happened to her. Someone has killed her badly."
Yeah,
and then you see the flower. Oh, this flower must be from the island, because everything that falls from there ends up in the beaches.
Yeah,
so you get little hints.
I do think that the way that he draws them threads together is really expert like that. The woman floats up and then she picks that flower up and then it's like, oh yeah, you know, it's just bits from Ireland washes up on mainland, and that's you know, and then the piñata scene, you see that, and then it calls it back, and the way that the pulling on, you know, pulling these threads together, it is really masterfully done, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then obviously we have to live with the fear that now these murderous children have got guns and a boat.
And we know there are a lot of kids.
Exactly.
When he says that, when he's like, well, we're just going to go, we're everywhere, there's loads of us, and you think, oh my God, like what would happen? But and that, you know, that manipulation, like when that girl comes in and she's crying and she's like, Papa, and he goes with her, and then you hear him screaming,
and you're like, no.
He's like, please,
it's my daughter, what can I do? And you hear,
yeah, and that's it. What can you do? I think that's the real tension at the heart of it, isn't it? Is like it's these people's children that have turned on them. So what can you do? You know, but even at the end when Tom comes out and they're all standing there, there's this moment and he looks at them all with such like sad tenderness. And they're all looking at him, and then obviously he cocks machine gun and he blows them away. But just before
for a split second, there,
there's this moment you can see it in his face. I mean, I do think that, you know, the acting in it is, you know, the way so much of it is just looking at their expression, and it's done really well, I thought, anyway.
And imagine having to direct all those kids.
Oh God, how did he keep them all in? Well, obviously threats. Who can kill a child? Me. I can.
I'll show you.
Yes, absolutely.
But I suppose finding parents who would let the children. But then I suppose, like you've said clearly, it's not really explicitly violent. There's not a lot where the children are actually being violent. It's more.
Then maybe they wouldn't have known until the film came out, right?
Yeah, they've edited it.
Oh,
yeah, well, actually, I also made there were other times, so there were not really any laws protecting kids at all. In Spain,
who can exploit a child?
Yeah,
exactly. So they could do anything, and also at the same time, I met the son of the director. And he told me that one of the kids is his cousin. So he actually, I guess, all the bad things for the cousin. I will do this. You show her teeth.
Yeah, you do it. I'll do it. Yeah, because
brilliant.
I mean, they do get around that really well, I think, particularly in that scene when he does shoot the little boy. Like, you see the boy, and then he shoots, and then you don't see him, like, you know, blow an hole through a 4-year-old, which is probably for the best.
And you also think that the kid's gonna shoot the wife. That's what you think is gonna happen.
Yeah,
that he's just gonna blow her.
Yeah.
So it's everything is done with a lot of intelligence.
Yeah.
And a lot of intelligence and a lot of mean spirit.
Yeah, which is what you want in a horror. Although I do have to say that I think the biggest horror in that film is the shopping list that man brings back. So he's got sardines, hot dogs, tinned fruit, and bread. I mean, what meal do you make out of that? Is it not bad enough? You're trapped on an island and kids are murdering you, and you're trying to eat sardines and hot dogs together. Just horrendous. And he's so proud. He's like, I've got us provisions, and you think
exactly.
Yeah. And so you're in Spain and you think you're gonna have a great food, and you have sardines.
and a really, really blackened chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely island.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
And later this holidays I saw the White Lotus, and I saw the second season. And the beginning of the second season, I thought, Who Can Kill a Child?
Yeah.
With the body arriving at the beach.
Yeah. I do think that I'm really glad you picked it because I'd not seen it before. And I do think everything that you've mentioned about how it's directed and how it's shot and the way that the story moves along is so good. And I like the language barrier to it as well, that like the wife don't really know what's going on. And to be fair, neither did I for most of it, because I found it on
an
YouTube.
International audience, definitely.
Yeah.
I found it on YouTube and closed captions didn't work. So at the end, because I was like running up to TV with my Google Translate, like what?
Okay. I think I don't know if there's an international. I have it on DVD. I don't know if there's an international release with the subtitles. I'm not sure. Really, but there should be.
There should be.
There is. Yeah. They released it. Yeah.
Arrow released the House That Screamed, the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But this we of course, this is like we try, and then in the end it works so well because now I think they will maybe Spanish policemen will know.
Yes.
It's them.
Yeah.
but at that time they didn't.
Yeah, that was so chilling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the way that so obviously they've shot him and he's in sea, and then they turn around and they've just all got the guns. They're just like, bye, adios.
Yes.
Just shooting it. It's insane. Yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for picking it. I'm so glad I got to watch it.
Yeah, definitely a great watch.
Glad you loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll be honest, I'd watch anything you told me to watch ever. So, but have you got any final thoughts you want to add about the film, Carlota, before we move on?
Not really. That if you have if your interest is spiked, maybe you should watch another movie, a Spanish movie that is called Arrebato, that has been released, I think, by I don't remember what's the name of the I can't remember the name of this DVD company that is fantastic. I cannot remember. It's an American company. I can't remember. I have such bad memory. But Arrebato by Ivan Zulueta. Arrebato with a double R, and it's a very creepy vampire story / drug addiction before Abel Ferrara tried to do it.
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah. Oh, I'll have a look for that. Oh, brilliant. Yeah. Well, we always have a recommendation section, so you've just given us one excellent recommendation there. Have you got any others for people who liked Who Can Kill a Child and would like further watching?
They can watch also Tras el Cristal, de Vigalonga, and Tras el Cristal, I don't know the international title, and this is another great Spanish movie. And you haven't seen Rec by Paco Plaza. You should watch it. Have you seen Rec?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't. Definitely check it out.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I think it's one of. I love the whole saga, but my favorite one is the number one, of course, and also number 3, which is more of a comedy than anything.
Yeah. No, I really loved it. I thought it was really, really scary as well. Quite really. I mean, the idea is scary, but yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. Oh, fantastic!
And then that Rec is the first fan footage done in Spain.
Yeah, it's such a good idea. Such an interesting premise. Yeah. I think they did a remake of that, didn't they? I think
they did. I haven't seen it. It's called Quarantine.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it.
I'll not watch it. I'm not bothered. I'd rather watch the original.
Yeah.
Have you? So, what about you, Clelia? Do you have any recommendations?
I've got a couple, yeah. I mean, I'm going to be a massive suck up here, Carlotas, but obviously if people haven't seen Piggy yet, then, what have they been doing with their life? So so definitely the one. The House That Screamed, the first film from the director we've been talking about. A film from 1970 called And Soon the Darkness. which is a UK film, I think, about a couple of English girls stranded on the European continent, not just in trouble with the lurking killer, but also, the idea of, we've talked about the idea of being, linguistically struggling to communicate with the locals. So this one is a really good one. In terms of the ending of Who Can Kill a Child, I thought of Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's difficult to say why without spoiling the the film. So those were my recommendations. The one that I could think about.
It's a clear reference, and I don't do that. Absolutely.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, I've got Don't Look Now. Not only because Tom looks like a rip-off Donald Sutherland.
He does.
He does.
But I think that idea of, a couple abroad and that it's a fantastic film that is also shocking in ways much like Who Can Kill a Child, I think. Children of the Corn, I do love Children of the Corn. I think it's an excellent example of American folk horror. But I do think it's a shame that every time people talk about Children of the Corn, no one mentions Who Can Kill a Child. It's really strange to me. They're such a natural pair. And then I had Alice, Sweet Alice, Murderous Children Abound, and Creepy Doll Masks, if that's your bag. And then I had The Brood, which still, I've only watched it once because it freaked me out that bad. I've never been able to watch it again. The horrible children.
Yeah, about the horrible children will be also the Village of the Damned.
The Village of the Damned, yeah. I did see that as well, and I was thinking about the Village of the Damned. So yes, so we've got a lot of films about murderous kids, and obviously you mentioned Clelia. There's The Omen, and The Exorcist as well. So yeah, there's loads of options.
A whole slew of them, exactly. If that's your bag, if that's your subgenre, then there's plenty to watch.
I think a big reference for this movie was The Lord of the Flies as well.
Yeah, I had Lord of the Flies. I was thinking when I was watching it, you could see that real, that idea that children are quite inherently bloodthirsty. And it's only society's rules that sort of keep them in check, because there's that lack of empathy as well, isn't there, for children? They're still developing it. So it might be easy to murder people when you're a child. I don't know. But yeah, Lord of the Flies. So yeah, there's loads of options. If people like murderous children, I mean, there's loads of films. Oh, well, thank you so much, Carlota, for coming on. We so appreciate it.
Thank you, it's been lovely.
Thank you, it's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have you got anything coming up that you'd like to let our listeners know about?
Well, we have The Chapel, which is it's actually a movie that I got. It's a movie that I didn't. It's not my original idea, but I did after Piggy. But it actually was going to be my first feature, because there was a production company that came to me before I had done Piggy, because they had also seen the short films. And there's a chapel. We don't have yet an international and a UK release. And I'm also working on 2 other things that I can talk about, but they're all within the genre spectrum, as people like to say.
Oh, very mysterious and exciting.
Very mysterious, very exciting. Exactly, yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to see. And where can people find you to follow your work? Are you on social media?
I'm on Instagram, and they say I'm on Twitter, but I don't really am, because it's just a place full of hate.
Is anyone on
it's
Twitter
a hellscape,
anymore?
exactly.
Does anyone use Twitter?
Yeah, but I'm on Instagram, but I think there's some of my shorts are online. Piggy, my short film is on Alter, which is a YouTube channel for horror. And that's the short film is there. And I think, Vertigo released Piggy in the UK, and it's been with different online platforms in the United States and in Japan and everywhere in the world. It's been also released in DVDs in Germany and other places. And the blogs, I think it's online, but without subtitles. And on February, it's going to be a new release for another short that I did after Piggy that is called There Will Be Monsters. And it's going to be on Alter as well.
Oh, brilliant.
Amazing.
Oh, fantastic.
Brilliant. Looking forward to watching all this.
Yeah, so definitely would recommend everyone to check out these brilliant shorts and keep an eye out. Hopefully we get a release of The Chapel. Come on, chop, UK. Let's get that. And you're on Instagram. And yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
very
Have
much.
a great year.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for listening to Monstrous Flesh. Please join us next time for more discussion about women in horror. You can find out more about us via our website, monstrousflesh.co.uk, where you can find out more about our research for each episode, buy our wonderful merch, and see our upcoming events. We'd love to hear from you, either via our email or social media channels. Also, please rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts and help us spread our spooky word by telling your friends about Monstrous Flesh. Until next time, creep it weird, everyone!